I in Conference Room 4, B Grand Lotte Hotel, Busan, 9:47 a.m. The door didn't open. It was moved. Candy Williams hit it with her shoulder mid-stride and was already talking before it finished swinging behind her, her voice filling the room the way her presence always filled rooms, completely and without apology. The folder in her hand landing on the conference table with a crack that bounced off the glass walls and the high ceiling and came back twice as loud. "Whoever double-booked this room," she said, pulling documents out with both hands and spreading them across the table in the precise order she had arranged them at 5:30 this morning, "has about 30 seconds to collect their things before I start moving them myself." She didn't look up. She was already connecting her laptop to the projector cable, already straightening the stack of printed proposals she had checked 3 times on the bus ride over, already running through the opening of her presentation in the back of her mind the way she had been running through it every morning for the past 3 weeks. The Hyundai development timeline, the risk framework, the phased construction model, the community integration strategy that had kept her up until 2 a.m. on more nights than she could count, and that she knew, with the bone-deep certainty of someone who had built something extraordinary and knew it was going to change everything. 6 months of work. Every piece of it hers. Her name on every page. Today was the day it stopped being invisible. A throat cleared. Not her throat. Someone else's. Candy looked up. The man at the head of her table had not moved. Not his hands. Not his shoulders. Not the set of his jaw. Nothing. He was simply there, occupying the chair at the top of the table with the absolute, unhurried stillness of something that did not need to shift its weight to hold its ground. Broad shoulders filling a black suit that had been cut specifically for his body and no one else's. Dark hair immaculately styled, a jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and tattoos, climbing from beneath his collar, curling up the side of his neck in dense, deliberate ink that mapped a life lived entirely outside the lines of ordinary men. His eyes were on her, not glancing, not scanning the room, on her, with the kind of complete focused attention that did not blink and did not apologize, and had absolutely no interest in pretending it was anything other than what it was. Behind him, one step to the right and slightly back, stood a leaner man in a charcoal jacket, watchful, still, a slight quality to his expression that suggested he found most things in life mildly interesting and was keeping very careful score. He was holding a printed document. Candy registered both of them in approximately 1 second. She registered the tattooed man's suit, the quality of it, the cut of it, the particular way expensive fabric sits on a person when the person wearing it has never once in their life needed the suit to do any work for them. She registered the stillness, the tattoos, the eyes that had not moved from her face since she walked in. She registered all of it, and she filed it under "not my problem right now" and looked back at her laptop screen. "This room is booked under Williams Consulting from 9:45 to 11, she said, pulling up her confirmation email and angling the screen toward no one in particular. "I have a client presentation in," she checked her watch, 12 minutes. "Whatever brought you to this specific room this morning, I need you to take it to the front desk because I need this table and this projector and this—" "Miss Williams." The lean man stepped forward, extending the document in his hand toward her. His voice was measured and carefully neutral in the way of someone who had spent years practicing exactly how much or how little to put into 2 words. "Our booking confirmation," he said. "Time-stamped. This room was reserved under Park Industries 6 weeks ago. There appears to have been an administrative error on the hotel's part, and we would be happy to—" "I don't need the confirmation," Candy said. She didn't take the paper. The lean man blinked. It was a very small blink. The blink of a man who was not accustomed to people not taking the paper. "I need the room," she continued. "My client is already in this building. My presentation starts at 10. The hotel made the error. The hotel can sort the rebooking. And whoever Park Industries is, they are welcome to whatever conference room the front desk has available that is not this one." She looked back at her screen. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience." She was not, particularly, sorry for the inconvenience. The lean man opened his mouth. The tattooed man at the head of the table raised one hand, barely an inch off the armrest. It's the most minimal possible gesture. And the lean man closed his mouth immediately and completely. Silence. Candy became aware, in the silence, of the fact that the tattooed man had still not moved, had not shifted in his chair, had not reached for his phone or looked at his watch or done any of the things people do when they are processing a situation. He was simply watching her with that complete, unblinking attention, and there was something in it. Not threat exactly, not aggression, something quieter and more total than either of those things, that prickled at the back of her neck in a way she did not particularly appreciate. She ignored it and kept working. The lean man set the confirmation document directly on top of the papers she was trying to organize. She picked it up, and not because she wanted to, because it was blocking her from seeing her own documents and she needed to move it. She glanced at it with the speed of someone who reads fast and retains everything, intending to set it aside in the same motion. Her eyes stopped. Park Industries. Park Joonho, CEO. She read the name again. Then she reached across the table and pulled her own client brief toward her. The document she had printed and laminated and read so many times the edges had started to soften. She looked at the name at the top of page 1. Park Joonho. The client. The Park Industries account. The Hyundai nightclub development. The contract that had 6 months of her life poured into it, and her name on every single page of it, and the potential to finally make her work visible and undeniable in this city. Park Joonho. She looked up slowly. The tattooed man at the head of her table looked back at her. And in his expression, still controlled, still perfectly composed, there was the very faintest suggestion of a man who had been waiting for exactly this moment and had known it was coming. Candy set both documents down, squared her shoulders, picked up her presentation remote. The situation had 2 possible responses. The first was to apologize, to smooth it over, to recalibrate her posture and her tone, and start again from a position of damage control, which was what most people would do, and which she had spent her entire professional life watching other people do, and getting absolutely nowhere from. The second was to do what she had come here to do. "You're my client," she said. "Apparently," he said. His voice was low, quiet in the way of someone who had never needed volume because volume was never the point. "Then you're exactly who I need in this room." She clicked to slide one. "Let's not waste any more time." What followed was the finest 22 minutes of work Candy Williams had ever delivered in her life. She didn't stumble once, didn't soften, didn't hedge, didn't perform the careful modesty she had watched other consultants use to make powerful clients feel comfortable. She moved through the presentation the way she moved through every room, with the focused, straight-backed authority of a woman who had built something extraordinary from the ground up and knew every corner of it and had no intention of pretending otherwise. The Hyundai development timeline. The risk mitigation framework, 3 tiers, color-coded, in every contingency accounted for. The phased construction model that would cut projected delays by 38%. The community integration strategy. The piece she was most proud of. The piece no competing firm had thought to include. The piece that accounted for the residential footprint around the site and the noise ordinances and the specific social architecture of the Hyundai district in a way that demonstrated not just strategic competence, but a bone-deep familiarity with this city that could not be faked or imported from Seoul. She knew this city. She had known it her whole life. Every slide showed it. Daniel Kim, the lean man in the charcoal jacket, whose name she did not yet know, had stopped looking at his phone 4 minutes in. He was watching her with the expression of a man recalibrating an assumption he had arrived with and finding the recalibration uncomfortable and interesting in equal measure. Park Joonho had not moved once. He watched her the way he watched everything, with that complete, focused, unblinking stillness. But there was something different in it from the moment she clicked to slide 3. Something that had not been there when she walked in. Something that was not assessment anymore, or not only assessment. Something he had not put there intentionally and was not, in this moment, fully accounting for. She clicked to the final slide. That's the full proposal. She set the remote down and looked at him directly. Timeline, budget projections, and risk index are in the packet in front of you. I'm happy to walk through any section in detail. A beat. Questions? The room was quiet. Park Joonho looked at her across the conference table, across the 6 months of work laid out between them, across the risk index and the community integration strategy and every page with her name printed cleanly at the top, and tilted his head, just slightly, in the way of a man who has decided to say the thing he is about to say and has made that decision deliberately and completely. Is that all you've got? His voice was quiet, precise, designed to land exactly where it landed. You black bitch. The room stopped. Daniel Kim went completely, professionally still. The stillness of a man performing the single greatest act of professional self-control of his entire career. The air in conference room 4B turned to glass. But Candy Williams stood at the head of the table with her presentation remote in her hand and felt Park Joonho's contempt arrive, felt it cross the room and find her and press against her, and felt it find nothing. Nothing to grip. Nothing to crack. Nothing that had not already been through worse and come back standing. She had been called foreign in her own city since she was old enough to understand what the word meant. She had been overlooked and talked around and talked over and smiled past and talked down to in every register available to the human voice. She had survived the worst things this city had to offer. Not this, not a word from a man in a conference room, not today, not ever. She tilted her head, looked at him with the flat, clear, completely undecorated gaze of a woman who has made an accurate assessment and sees no reason to soften the result, and said, in perfect, flawless, Busan-accented Korean, his language, her city, not one syllable out of place, delivered with the calm certainty of a woman who was born speaking this language in these streets and has never once needed anyone's permission to use it. No, I'm just getting started, you moron. She snapped her laptop shut, tucked her folder under her arm, and walked out of conference room 4B without looking back, without checking his face, without one single backward glance to see what the word had done. The door swung closed behind her. Park Joonho did not move. The room settled around him, the hum of the projector still running, the Busan skyline gray and wide through the floor-to-ceiling glass, Daniel Kim standing one step to the right and slightly behind with the expression of a man who had just witnessed something he was going to be thinking about for a very long time. Joonho looked at the closed door. Then, slowly, he looked down at the table, at the proposal she had left behind, every page of it, her name printed at the top of each one in clean, unambiguous black lettering. He picked up the first page, read it, set it down. The silence stretched. Sir, Daniel Kim's voice was measured, careful. The voice of a man choosing his words with the precision of someone who had learned that precision in this particular man's orbit was not optional. She had no idea who you are. Joonho stood. He straightened his jacket, one smooth, unhurried motion, the automatic physical composure of a man who had not been visibly rattled by anything in 6 years, and moved toward the door. I know, he said. He reached for the handle. Find out everything about her. He walked out into the corridor toward the elevator, without hurry and without explanation, and without anything in his posture that could have been mistaken for retreat. The elevator doors opened. He stepped in. The doors closed. He stood alone in the mirrored box of the elevator as it descended, and he thought about the way she had said it. Not the word itself, though no one had ever called him that. Not once. Not in 6 years of running the most feared organization in South Korea. He thought about the certainty of it. The complete, unperformed, a bone-deep certainty of a woman who had made an accurate measurement and had seen absolutely no reason to soften the result. The way she had delivered it in his language, not tourist Korean, not textbook Korean, but Busan Korean, the real thing, his city in every syllable, and then walked out without once looking back to check whether it had landed. He had been looked at with fear his entire adult life, with deference, with careful, practiced neutrality, with the specific controlled blankness of people who understood what happened when they said the wrong thing in his presence. She had looked at him like he was in her room. That was all. Like he was an inconvenience in a space that belonged to her, and she had assessed him and found him manageable and moved on. He had not been looked at like that since he was someone different. Since before Seo Yeon, since before Min-jae, since before the night he came home and found the two people he trusted above everyone else in the same room in the same betrayal, and made the decision he made and became the man he had been since. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. Park Joonho walked out into the marble and glass of the Grand Lotte Hotel's ground floor and felt, moving through him like a fault line shifting, the very first hairline fracture in a wall he had built to last forever. He didn't notice it yet. He would. If you want more of this, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Like and comment where you're watching from. You will not want to miss where this goes. Now, back to the story. The number 14 bus smelled like rain and fried fish, and the particular staleness of a morning commute that had been running the same route since before Candy was born. And she sat in the window seat with her folder on her lap, and her forehead almost touching the glass, and watched Busan move past her in the gray early light. Hyundai, Suyong. The coast road where the sea appeared between buildings in brief gray flashes. There and gone, there and gone. The way it always had since she was small enough to press her whole face against bus windows without anyone finding it unusual. Her father used to take this exact bus. Every morning for 22 years, Emmanuel Williams had taken the number 14 from their apartment in Sahagu to the Hyundai construction sites. A lunch packed in the same blue container her mother washed and refilled every night without being asked. Steel-toed boots already laced before the alarm finished sounding. A man of habit. A man of absolute unshakable routine. As if consistency itself was a form of argument against a city that had spent years suggesting, in small ways and large ones, that he did not entirely belong here. He had belonged here. Grace had belonged here. Candy had been born here, in a hospital 3 kilometers from this bus stop, had learned to walk on these streets, and learned to argue in this language, and learned, the specific hard way that children learn things their parents tried to protect them from. That belonging somewhere and being made to feel like you belong, there are 2 entirely different experiences that this city had never once confused. She had gone to London at 22 to build herself something sharp enough to come back with. She had come back. She always came back. John was waiting for her in the hallway outside the office when she stepped off the elevator, which meant he had been watching the door, which meant he had been worried, which meant he was about to be insufferable. He was wearing a caramel blazer over a pale blue shirt at 8:41 in the morning and holding 2 coffees, and he looked at her face and said, "That bad?" "That's strange," she said, taking one of the coffees. Strange how? She thought about the tattooed man at the head of her table. The stillness. The eyes that had not moved from her face. The way he had said what he said with the calm precision of a man who had chosen the word deliberately and was waiting to see what it produced. The way she had replied and walked out and felt in the elevator going down, not triumph exactly, but something older and quieter than triumph. The specific flat feeling of a woman who has been through the actual worst things and has learned that words, even those words, do not touch the places that matter. "I'll tell you later," she said. "I need to write my notes while they're fresh." John looked at her for exactly 3 seconds with an expression she did not catch because she was already moving toward her desk. 3 seconds of complete stillness. Then he turned and followed and said, "Okay, coffee first, notes after. Tell me everything." Matthew appeared at 10:15. He materialized in the office doorway the way he always materialized, smoothly, unhurriedly, with the specific ease of a man who had spent so long occupying spaces that didn't belong to him that he had stopped noticing the occupation. Dark suit, silver watch catching the overhead light, the smile that had been his primary professional tool for 15 years and had never once cost him anything, until recently. Though he didn't know that yet. Candy. He said her name the way he always said it, warmly, familiarly, with the faint suggestion of a man who had done her a favor she should probably remember. How did the Park Industries presentation go? She looked up from her screen. Well? Good, good. He leaned against the doorframe with his arms loosely crossed and his head tilted at the angle that meant he was about to say something he had already decided to say. I've been thinking about the Hyundai account. Given the scale of it, Park Industries, the syndicate connections, the level of relationship management required, it might make sense for me to step in and lead the client relationship going forward. You'd still be doing the work, obviously. Just with my name attached, given the what, Matthew? The warmth in her voice was not warm. He recalibrated, smiled again. Given the politics of it, these are serious people. It helps to have a senior name on the correspondence. She looked at him for a moment. Just long enough. I'll keep that in mind, she said. He nodded and left. John, from his desk across the room, watched Matthew's back disappear around the corner, and then looked at Candy with an expression that was not quite anger and not quite sorrow, but lived precisely in the space between them. Candy had already turned back to her screen. Her notes from the morning were open in front of her. The Park Industries brief. The proposal. The name at the top of page 1. She was already thinking about what came next. 3 days after the presentation, Candy was at her usual table in the cafe on the ground floor of her building, laptop open, green tea cooling at her elbow, the lunch crowd thinning around her, when she looked up and found Park Joonho standing at the counter, not looking at her, ordering coffee. Speaking to the barista in a low, unhurried voice, black coat over a charcoal suit, completely still in the particular way that made the space around him rearrange itself without his having to ask. She looked back at her screen, looked up again 30 seconds later. He was sitting down, 3 tables away, facing her direction. With a coffee and a newspaper, and the absolute calm of a man who ate alone in public places all the time and found nothing remarkable about it. He did not look at her. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she closed her laptop, picked up her tea, and went back to work. He was there again 2 days later. Different cafe, same building complex, same black coat, same stillness. Daniel Kim was with him this time, sitting slightly apart, phone out, doing what assistants do in public spaces when their employers are pretending to be somewhere casually. Candy noted this. She started paying attention. By the end of the week, she had seen him 3 times in spaces she frequented, and once in a space she did not frequent at all. A bookshop in Gwangali she had only gone into because it had started raining and she needed somewhere to wait it out. He had been in the architecture section, not looking at her, just there. She went home that evening and sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and typed Park Joonho into a search engine and hit enter and sat very still while the results loaded. She read for 2 hours. By the time she closed the laptop, the tea was cold and the apartment was dark, and she understood, with the specific weight of information that lands not all at once but in layers, each one heavier than the last, exactly what kind of man had been sitting in her conference room. She also understood that he had not come to any of those places by accident. She picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up again. Not yet. She needed to know more. She needed to know all of it before she walked into whatever this was. She was her mother's daughter. She knew how to be patient. She knew how to build a case from fragments until the picture was complete and undeniable. She started building. John found her at her desk at 7:30 the following morning, which was 45 minutes before anyone else arrived, surrounded by printed pages and 3 empty tea mugs, and the focused, radiating stillness of a woman deep inside a problem she had decided to solve. He set a fresh tea on the corner of her desk and sat down across from her without being asked. "Tell me about the conference room, my friend," he said. She looked at him over the papers. "What makes you think this is about him?" "You have that face." "I have many faces." "You have the face you had before you built the Matthew file, the one where you've decided something and you're gathering." He picked up his own coffee. "Tell me about him." She described the conference room, the stillness, the tattoos climbing his neck, the way he had sat in her chair like he had been placed there by the universe and saw no reason to apologize for it. The word he had used, her reply, the smile, the real one, unguarded, sharp at the edges, that had cracked across his face just before she walked out. John listened to all of it. When she finished, he was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Something moved across his face, there and gone, fast enough that she almost missed it. A flicker of something that was not quite surprise. Then he picked up his coffee and said warmly and with complete enthusiasm, "Okay, so he's interested. What are you going to do about it?" Candy looked at him. "I'm going to find out everything about him first." "Obviously," John said. "That's very you." She turned back to her papers. John looked at his coffee for a moment with an expression she didn't see. He was going to need to think very carefully about what he did and did not say next. She found out everything about him in 7 days. Not all at once. In layers, the way she had known it would come, each one landing harder than the one before it. The first layer was his name attached to buildings, the Park Industries portfolio, the legitimate empire, the hotels and the construction holdings, and the entertainment developments that had been reshaping Busan's skyline for a decade. Clean, documented, publicly available. The second layer was what sat underneath the clean documentation. Park Joonho, head of the Park organization. The most feared criminal syndicate in South Korea, operating across 3 countries, controlling territorial interests from Busan to Seoul to Tokyo, with a reach into legitimate business that made the 2 worlds essentially indistinguishable from the outside and entirely distinguishable to anyone who knew where to look. She knew where to look. She had spent 5 years learning how construction money moved and where it came from, and what it looked like when it had been somewhere it shouldn't have been. The third layer was what the organization had cost people. She sat with the third layer for a long time. By Friday evening, she had enough. She closed the laptop, changed into a black turtleneck and dark trousers, and took a taxi to the restaurant where she had, 40 minutes earlier, sent him a single message. "We need to talk. Tonight." He had replied in under a minute. Address. The restaurant was his. Of course it was his. She had done enough research to know that approximately a third of the quality dining establishments in Haeundae had some connection to the Park portfolio. And it was the kind of place that was quietly, specifically expensive, in a way that didn't need to announce itself. Dark wood, low light. Tables spaced far enough apart that conversation stayed where it was put. He was already there when she arrived. Black suit, no tie. Sitting with the stillness she was beginning to understand was simply the natural state of him. Not performance, not intimidation, just the way a man holds himself when he has spent years in rooms where stillness was the most dangerous thing available. She sat down across from him without taking off her coat. "I know what you are," she said. He looked at her. I know." "Then you know why I'm here." "Tell me anyway." She looked at him across the table, across the low light and the expensive silence, and the specific charged quality of a space that had rearranged itself around this man the moment he walked into it. "You have been appearing in my spaces for 10 days, deliberately, with resources and precision. I want to know why." He was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone finding an answer, the quiet of someone deciding how much of the true one to give. "Because you are the first person in longer than I can remember," he said, who looked at me like I was ordinary. "I want to understand that." She studied him. "I looked at you like you were in my room. That was all it was." "I know." Something shifted in his expression, not softened exactly, but moved. "That is exactly what I mean." She stood, buttoned her coat. "I don't do this," she said. "Whatever this is. I have work. I have a firm to build. I don't have space for—" She gestured briefly at him, at the restaurant, at the whole specific weight of what he was. "Any of this." "I'm not asking for your space," he said. I'm asking for one dinner. This is a dinner. A real one. Tuesday. No agenda. She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back with the complete patience of a man who had decided to wait and meant it. One dinner, she said. Tuesday. She left without looking back. In the restaurant, Daniel Kim materialized from a table near the back and sat down across from Joonho with the expression of a man processing several things simultaneously. She said yes, he said. She said Tuesday, Joonho said. It's not the same thing. He picked up his water glass. It's a start. Tuesday was Korean barbecue in a place Candy chose. Small, busy. No connection to the park portfolio that she had been able to find, which had required some research and which she considered a minor professional victory. She arrived 4 minutes early and he was already there, which she filed away as information. No suit tonight. Dark navy jacket over a black shirt, collar open, the tattoos at his neck visible above the fabric. He looked, in the low warm light of the restaurant with the grill smoking between them, almost like someone who existed in an ordinary world. Almost. They talked for 2 hours. Not about the organization, not about Matthew or the firm or the Hyundai project. About Busan, the city, its particular architecture, the way the waterfront had changed in the last decade, and whether the change was improvement or erasure. He had opinions, specific, considered unsentimental opinions that surprised her because they were good. She asked about one of the tattoos, the one at the base of his throat, a single vertical line of characters she didn't recognize. He looked at her for a moment. Then he told her what it meant. Just that one. Just the meaning, quietly, without elaboration. She didn't push for the rest. He thought about that specific restraint, the not pushing, for 3 days afterward, and could not stop. At the end of the evening, he walked her to the taxi line. No grand gesture. No performance. Just presence. Standing beside her in the cold Busan air with his hands in his pockets and the city spread out around them. Next Tuesday, he said. Gee, it wasn't a question. It wasn't quite a statement either. It landed somewhere in between, in the specific register of a man who was asking without asking, because asking directly was still new territory, and he was learning it carefully. Next Tuesday, she said. She got in the taxi. He stood on the pavement and watched it pull into the Busan traffic and felt the hairline fracture from the elevator widen, just slightly, in the dark. The Tuesdays accumulated. 4 of them. Then 6. Then she stopped counting because counting implied she was tracking something she wasn't sure she was ready to name. What she knew was this. He was different across a dinner table than he was in every other context she had researched and observed. The stillness was the same. That never changed. She was beginning to think it was simply structural, built into him at a level below choice. But the quality of it was different. In the conference room and in the spaces where people knew who he was, the stillness radiated outward, compressed the air, made people careful. Across a dinner table with her, it was something else. It was the stillness of a man paying full attention, of someone who had decided that what was happening in front of him was worth every bit of his focus, and was giving it that focus without reservation. He listened to her the way very few people had ever listened to her, not waiting for his turn, not half present while assembling his response. Actually there, actually in the conversation, absorbing what she said and sitting with it before he answered, so that when he answered it was specific to what she had actually said, rather than what he had expected her to say. She noticed this on the 3rd Tuesday, and it unsettled her in a way she didn't immediately have language for. On the 6th Tuesday, over cold noodles in a place she had been coming to since university, she said, "Why did you close yourself down?" He looked at her across the table. "What makes you think I did?" "The apartment," she said. "No photographs. Nothing personal anywhere. The way your staff move around you, not just carefully, which would be professional, but around you, like there's a radius. The way you—" She paused, choosing the word. "Receive things. Like you've practiced not reacting." He was quiet for a moment. 6 years ago, he said, I was married. His voice was level, the level of someone who has told this story to themselves many times and has made it manageable that way. Her name was Seo Yeon. I trusted her completely. I gave her everything, my name, my protection, the parts of myself I had never shown anyone. A pause. I came home one night and found her with my brother, Min-jae, the two people I had placed above every other person in my life. Candy said nothing. She let it land and stay where it landed. I made a decision that night, he continued. Nothing in. Nothing that could be used. Nothing that could be turned into that specific kind of damage again. He looked at her steadily. 6 years. It worked. Until a woman walked into a conference room and called me a moron in my own language and walked out without looking back, and something came open that I have not been able to close since. The restaurant moved around them. Other tables, other conversations, the ordinary living noise of a Busan Tuesday evening. Candy looked at him across the cold noodles and the low light and the 6 weeks of Tuesday dinners, and felt something she had been keeping carefully at arm's length move, quietly and without permission, several steps closer. That's the most honest thing you've said to me, she said. I'm aware, he said. It's new territory. She picked up her chopsticks. Don't make it weird, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he smiled. The real one, the unguarded one, sharp at the edges and entirely involuntary, and picked up his own chopsticks and said nothing at all. Across the restaurant, at a corner table, Daniel Kim looked at his employer's face and took a long, slow breath. He was going to need to start preparing for consequences.